Yeah.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to another episode of the Girls Club, episode number 10. And today we have our special guest, Katrina Monaghan, and we're going to be talking about a pretty interesting subject that she brought up to us a couple of months ago. We're like, let's put it on the roster. So, our subject today is how unhealed trauma leaves a hurtful legacy on children and families. And just talking about the generational effects that it could play, not necessarily through the bloodline, maybe in some cases through the bloodline, but how our behavior shapes how we develop as young children and the things that bring that we hold on to, especially at a young age, and then we grow up and we develop into this person that has traits from people that we may have not normally have picked up, or maybe it's even I would even suggest to consider that it could be from remnants from past life experiences, even like subconscious memories, like unresolved issues, even. There's some case studies about that, but to move on to our first couple of points here that we wanted to bring up was the first one was coming away from promiscuity and someone's perspective after that. How it is not the answer for young women and our youth, and how many get lost in the hookup culture and they don't feel welcome in anything other than the red pill movement or in other very toxic spaces. So that's where we can start. And I'd like to know what you guys think. And we could start with you, Katrina, with your thoughts.
Okay. I'll try not to go on a huge tangent, but I easily could. So I was walking down the street one day with my boyfriend, Tyler, and I remember hearing these two young girls, probably like their early 20s, and they were talking about hooking up. And like I just remember the conversation was something about like this pride of like not settling down, not like not looking to have a relationship was empowering. Like it was more so like the hooking up was just this enticing, exciting thing. And like the way they talked about it was very like, I was just like so anti-life. And I just remember walking away and I was like, I kind of wish I said something like, but it's like finding those places to say something. Um, and like the reason I wanted to say something was because I kind of lived that growing up. And talking about unhealed trauma, I think a lot of it stems from, speaking for myself, um, like if you think of attachment, like our attachments growing up, if you're growing up with this idea of an avoidant and an anxious attachment, and that's your model. I know for myself, I went to look at magazines for advice. I looked at the culture. I didn't really look at my family because I didn't see a stable foundation of what a healthy relationship could look like. Like if you had told me 10, 15 years ago that I'd be in the relationship I am now, I'd be like in what world? Like that doesn't even exist when you're given this kind of idea of what a man is. And for me, it was very much like they were domineering, they were aggressive, you were going to be a victim as a woman, but you were going to be a victim as a woman. Um, and basically, you were there for men and like to protect yourself against that. So, like, I took that because it was such a young age that I picked that up that, like, that would mean, and like, obviously, this was subconscious, like, either get with them or get against them. And I kind of took the promiscuity way. Um, from like 18 years old till about not eight, that's not true. 21 till about 26 in the dating world. Like I did things that looking back, I would never do today. And I want to talk about this because I hear in the truth or moments a lot of blanket statements that I agree with, but I think I think if we're really to get to people, it's really helpful to back those statements with stories, because otherwise it's just an opinion. And somebody who's in that hookup culture, they're never going to hear that person. It's kind of like, I see it as um, like our political structure for Canada. It's like liberals versus conservatives, and like it's not much different with the states. So it's like this hyper independence. There's no community. It's just me, me, me. And I kind of feel like there's traits of that in like the truther movement. And then like on the radical left, liberal, it's very much like save me, mommy, save me, daddy. And like we need to kind of talk. Like it's very much polarized, and I don't think it's really helping people.
Yeah, there's a
Well,
lot
I
there.
love that. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Leslie.
Well, I'm just thinking about there's a lot of threads that are went through what you shared there, and I think if we're coming back to the idea of trauma and early experiences of trauma that are very obvious, like maybe sexual abuse or physical abuse or maybe even emotional abuse that is, uh, very or neglect, right, of children. Those things are going to impact the child's attachment, right, to their parents, to relationships in general, and and that can set the stage for the types of patterns that they have in adult relationships, right? Their ability to attach and connect and or over rely or under rely or be avoidant. So you brought up those issues of attachment styles and having, an avoidant, let's say parent that is very avoidant, that is, withholding of love and approval, or a very anxiously attached, like helicopter mom, that's worried about you crossing the street. Like there's all, and keeps you close. And, there's all sorts of dynamics. And so and those are all going to set the stage. And then our early, like adolescent experiences, I think, a lot of times I think adolescents are really lost and don't have a lot of guidance or clear direction, really influenced by the media and the reality TV and all this, crazy shit that they have access to on their phones and each other. And, so it's like a confusing world out there for young people from what I'm seeing, my children. And there's no real cultural model other than really to be like over sexualized. And, the messages that are coming across to kids is really not giving them a real moral foundation with which to act,
Yeah.
or there's so much like programming unconsciously. I even look back in my own life and I remember thinking like, why did I just sort of freeze and allow certain things to happen? Why did I become passive or unclear about speaking up for my own, wants, needs, or limits, right? There was like a weird programmed response and a certain frozenness that I didn't even know that was happening exactly,
Mhm.
right? So I think when it comes to like, there's things that people can say that are very shaming or that induce shame in people that blocks the processing and the really looking at this topic. So I think it is a really important topic and one to sort of open up in a safe way for people to kind of look more deeply at it.
Yeah.
Well, I love that you guys brought that up, and I entirely agree. I've found that um through trauma or not, we really tend to imprint on the relationship dynamics present in our environment and the family or group that we are raised in. And when we first start kind of exploring actual relationship dynamics, we often um, mimic and simulate a lot of those early on programs. And I think that, at least for me, when I was first trying out love as like a 15-year-old kid, and that relationship lasted 4.5 years. It was terrible, but a learning curve. a lot of those behavioral patterns that came up were that I gained during childhood. And I found that as we grow, we're able to bring in more consciousness to like what kind of relationships we want to have. And Leslie, you had mentioned like some social programmings and remembering a certain age period. I think we have kind of those inner inherent imprints from our childhood, and absolutely those social programs, because I can't help but notice I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up actually, though we were not Catholic, going to a private Catholic school for 9 years, from kindergarten through eighth grade, going to church 3 times a week. And actually, many of us who were raised with those kind of Christian values did not become super promiscuous. And I kind of think, religion was super huge, super popular, and a lot of people were Christians for a long time. And so the values that came with Christianity, people were upholding. And I can't help but notice, ever since I'm 33, ever since I was little, they've been showcasing Victoria's Secret models, more sex. Everything is so accessible. It's so in your fucking face. And Christianity is actually going down. So I think that society kind of has its programs that it's plugging into the collective. And personally, I think it's those values are decreasing. And as love is being more free and sexuality is being promoted, that is becoming the new normal. And with that, a lot of those values, like without, I don't want to say religion is the best thing ever. It can be very limiting. However, it did provide structured values and morals and guidelines to live our lives with. And I've really found, personally, I left Christianity over a decade ago, probably closer to 15 years ago now. And I've pretty much kind of ebbed and flowed between that open, loving kind of mindset to coming back to a more conservative mentality. And I never went through a promiscuous phase myself. I've always been in long-term committed relationships. Brian's only the fourth person I've ever gone all the way with, just because I've been at least serious about, like, okay, this person's at least going to be in line for forever. But
Yeah.
but I could never be so Christian. I couldn't wait until marriage, and I got
Yeah.
2 kids. So obviously, I've had
I'm
to find some middle ground though of like love and what that means, and just I don't know. I That's just a lot of thoughts too, but I just noticed that the transformation from youth into adulthood, and then spirituality from being really restricted to more free and open, and coming back to like, well, maybe I'll just stick to just my love and picking my person, and that's my person. And yeah, what do you guys think about all that?
I think that's really interesting that you guys brought all of that up. And like the first point I wanted to bring up was the societal issues. I think that's definitely like a big factor, because now what you were saying, now it's sex everywhere. And you've got this me complex coming up. And these are like definitely like, staple principles within like the satanic,
Yeah.
the real satanic, the dark occult, Satanism, where it's becoming so loose and easygoing about it that when you put something out into the world, it becomes, yesterday's news real quick, especially when it's there all the time. It becomes commonplace. It becomes more and more less of an issue. It becomes easier access, and people become more and more jaded, more and more, especially when you're building social constructs, like conditioning people, especially the youth, to think more of in this like me complex, in this atheistic materialist type of mindset. It's very easy to get young people to be very confused about who they are and what they are and how they should live their lives. And they just think it's a free for all and that's it. And it becomes very easy for kids to become, oh, well, this is normal. I mean, think about how, I bet you if we did a poll, like some kind of survey, and we asked kids who were under the age of 20, even, ask them like what they like, do you think that the world has always been like this? Just ask them. And a lot of when I've asked kids like, oh, you think the world's always been like this? You think we've always had smartphones? You think we've always had computers? And I've asked kids this who are 20 and older, and they're like, well, yeah, of course. Like I've had to explain to like, I mean, you'd think that'd be old enough to realize, history. They did go through grade school, right? These are kids going through grade school, and they still can't understand that some of us were saving up quarters to use a payphone, when we were kids, or, where they have a great grandparent who didn't have who grew up without electricity. Doesn't even cross their minds. So even though they went through grade school and history is part of the agenda, it's very easy to confuse kids because they can have, but that's the cognitive dissonance syndrome though, isn't it? They're thinking that they've been taught history, but at the same time, they think it's always been exactly like how they know it, with smartphones and everything and Amazon and instant gratification. And it's the same thing with being, with sex, just out in the open everywhere all the time, no matter what. And of course, kids are confused about it. Of course, kids are confused about who and what they are. And they think they're this, that, and the other thing. Of course, because they're being conditioned to believe one thing or the other. And I see that rise in just blatant thoughtlessness, I mean, and everybody goes through learning curves and goes through different phases, and that's normal. But it just feels like definitely a different, like there's been a barrier placed between somewhere between the generation of 20-year-olds and everybody who's older than that. And that is distinct to me. Like every generation has like different things going on, but it seems to be very, very distinct, like such a separation that it's like two different, they might as well be space aliens. It's just like a completely different human being almost.
Yeah, I
So
agree. I have a 16-year-old and a 23 and a 25-year-old, and there's a big difference between the older two and sort of the culture and mentality that they have, and then what my younger daughter's influences and the peer group is, and even she sees it. And I would say, like, okay, I listen to the rap music. It's like nasty, really
yeah,
nasty.
Terrible.
It's super sexual and graphic and very demeaning to women.
yeah,
There's absolutely no substance. There's no like real humanity in it. It's complete usury and sexual, like like violence even, and
Okay.
it's just awful.
yeah, it's really
So,
bad.
Okay, this is kind of irrelevant but fascinating. So I'm going to bring it up to see if you guys notice it and just think on it later. So I was brought upon an experiment probably like, I don't know, somewhere between 8 and 10 years ago to observe the music that you listen to and like sang your fucking heart out to, like growing up, and then go back and listen to it and listen to the lyrics and see what happens. I shit you not. Like, that is why I had depression. That is why I had anxiety. That is why I was like, I started hearing this stuff. I'm like, this is so fucking depressing. And so, like, now the music, there is something hypnotic. And, if you love a beat of a song, but the words are trashy and you're just like rocking out to it, like as an adult, at least we're able to be like, okay, we know better. This is not right. We can kind of logically work with it. But like kids, man, they're entraining that belief and stuff into their being. And it's like, yeah, I just wanted to mention the song Experiment if you guys wanted to go back, and we can talk about that another time. But yeah, it's just
it's a good
totally
one.
different music.
It points out how, in a way, unconscious we are a lot of the lyrics and the things we hear. And when you're looking back now, you see it, but then you didn't,
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I remember there's a couple times I would do some like journaling on like the shadow work, and like I'd release some of the feelings that came up related to like how I was behaving. And then like I don't know if it was like my psyche's way of trying to get my attention, but I'd hear an old song I used to listen to, and I was like, how much did this make an imprint on me as a kid and like my behavior? Because it was often related to my behavior. And it was like just my judgments towards men or like in relationships.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the music I listened to was more like, I guess it was more like, punk trash type of music. Like
I did some of that, a lot of that
stuff
too,
like, like Six Underground or Garbage and stuff like that. And I'd be like 15 blasting. My mom's like, oh my God, why are you listening to this? It's so depressing. I'm like, this is me now.
It's beautiful.
And it's just, she's like, oh God. And she was like all Patsy Cline and that kind of genre, heart, stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, music can play a huge, huge part on like who we are. Like, but even it's funny that you brought up rap music, like, because it is nasty. Like that's nasty. But it's at least it's kind of more out in the open where like you listen to a Sting song and it's like that is disturbing. like that's a little bit frightening actually. Like because I mean when I as an adult and I listen to that song as an adult and I'm really listening to the words, I'm like, oh no. But I mean, music plays a huge impact on how we develop, I think. And I think that's why the entertainment business has such a tight hold on it and controls everything about it.
And and it can bring people together in groups and create like songs that unite them. Like I think, and this will date me, but like "I Will Survive" by Gloria Gaynor. It's an older song, but it gets you going.
Yeah.
As a woman who's breaking out of a bad situation, and you come together, and there's
sometimes
a lot of,
that's relevant,
right? There is. It's like, but it can also sort of, I think you can see some of the patterns of in the music trends, around like women developing this hyper independence and kind of dissing the men, and men being portrayed as, abusers or something. And then, women getting that power. And a lot of the times then it gets mixed into the sexual power and the expressiveness and, being in control, taking back the power over sex and stuff, which I see, again, is like a response to trauma, to oppression. And then as culturally and then as individuals, people sort of go to a rebound to another extreme, right? To sort out their own place, consciously, right? And I think sometimes you have to experiment.
It's like they're kind of like unconsciously weaponizing their trauma to like empower themselves.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Which unconsciously. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then maybe sometimes consciously, but from parts that are very still traumatized, that then, kind of take over a person. And then it's like this symptom, this trauma symptom, this dominating, But I also think that, as part of that rebound, going from like the prudishness to, or like the Christian maybe guilt and shame, the Catholic shame, then sort of leads to a generation like, that are going to be all about freedom and, shedding that restriction and being self-led or autonomous. And what does that mean? And for women, I think that has been an important experiment, for a lot of women. But there's also then, pieces of shame mixed in with that, and confusion or unconsciousness. So there's right now, I notice a big trend towards polyamory, especially in California,
Oh my God, yeah.
Oregon, and very pleasure focused, really coming, taking the somatic, importance to like another extreme of pleasure kind of being the priority. There's really a diminishment in our general, I think, culture around philosophy, or really talking. Even morality kind of has this, like, it's like a bad word or something, like, oh God, you must be old to talk about morality or something. So there's so many, like, what I would say again are like polarizations, like bouncing back and forth, that are related to cultural traumas and individual traumas, societal traumas.
And people think you bring up something like morality and ethics, and they're like, immediately want to associate with religion, but really all it is a behavior.
Moral guide, like a guideline. Yeah.
That's all it was. And I mean, like, it's funny that you brought up Christianity, because I would say modern Christianity is on a whole kind of garbage. Ancient Christianity, which is anything before the time of the Emperor Constantine, which is a whole different show. But this is a completely different mindset. And it did change. And like, it wasn't Catholic, it was ancient Christianity, or what would be just Christianity if it hadn't been usurped by dark occultists, and then turned into this like very, even though it couldn't really get its full hold on the belief system, it got enough in to make it confusing for people, which is why a lot of people have been leaving Christianity generally as well, because it's just confusing and it doesn't make any sense. And the Bible is grossly mistranslated, which makes things even worse. And so you've got people, like you were saying, Brittany, there's a like the amount of people who are actually, they're leaving Christianity. It's not because they don't have a connection to, their faith or to God, or their, moral values, like such as like what you were describing, Brittany, because a lot of people I know who were Christian, they're like, I left the religion side of it because it doesn't make any sense. The way it's being taught today doesn't make any sense, but they still value those principles, that they the moral underpinnings from it, and that's all. I think there's a lot of subconscious, training in that as well. It's being trickled in, even subconsciously, and people are taking it in, just like the same way that people take in negative trauma and develop different kinds of traits, because of this or that or the other thing. So I thought that was really interesting that you brought that up. And I wanted to bring up the next point, which might kind of lead into this a little bit, maybe not so much, but some people in these various freedom movements that are going this way or that way, because now there's quite a lot, it seems to me, even as well. There's different sects of the freedom movement just as much as there is of the different religions, and kind of say things with a narrow brush and by accident or off the cuff due to a lack of experience or even, wherewithal, and without the nuance of stories from people who may have fit that brush at one point. So like the perspective it's not getting in, like there's no perspective, and it's just like an opinion being brought out, but it's, you know what I mean? So stories from those with experiences, they get lost in translation because they still feel shame from those stories. And then what can help people often doesn't. And then it just is regurgitation. And people need concrete examples to want to change. And I know in through experience, hearing other stories reduces that shame. So I wanted to go into that a little bit and see what you guys thought. And we could start with Katrina and your thoughts on this, because I know you have a few.
Yeah, I think like I remember going to this women's retreat, and I don't really go to retreats anymore because a lot of them feel kind of wooey and a little bit not grounded. But the one thing I took from this one retreat, we were in a circle and everybody was sharing something that they were deeply ashamed of. And this one girl in particular, she was super ashamed because she lost her shit on one of her students in her classroom. And I just, in that moment, my jaw just dropped because I was like, "Ah, we could make a mistake and not just be crucified for the rest of our life." Like, I just, that for me really like it just opened up something in me because like I already knew I had something of a shadow. I didn't really know if shadow was the term at the time, but I was always grappling with this like inner dialogue that I obviously believed with myself in some situations, but just hearing her talk about it in such a like wounded, um she had so much shame and she was just so open about it. And I was like, wow, like move like that kind of it switched gears for me. Like I started looking at myself deeper. I started to like forgive my own self for certain things. Um and just like when I was talking to Sarah about coming on here, like yeah, when I listen to some people, it's like I don't know if people don't ground themselves before coming on a podcast or like, they'll talk about shadow work, but in the same breath just talk down about this entire group of people. And I just it's comical and it's also frustrating because like we're talking about awareness, we're talking about making a better planet for all of us. And I'm just like, that doesn't happen when just some of us are free. Like that happens when we're all free. And like we need to invite people who are maybe a little bit more difficult and maybe we have judgments and stories about them. But like, yeah.
That's beautiful. I agree entirely with that. If it's not every single person that's free on this planet, free to live their lives, then it's not good enough. I
Yeah.
completely agree with that. It's just not good enough. Like if one person is still trapped, then none of us are free. And that's like I see it exactly the same way. That's really lovely.
And this isn't to say we don't have morals and like we don't encourage better behaviors, but it's
Yeah.
you have to hold people's hands sometimes, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think as long as people are showing care, nonviolence, and self-defensive force when required, and they're following morality and principles of morality and ethics, they don't harm somebody, I would feel let people live their lives however they want to live it. Like if it's within a religion, if they want to be, practicing whatever they want, like as long as it doesn't hurt other people, then, that's really where I think we should focus on getting everybody. Like that's, to me, that's kind of step one.
Yeah.
I'm
If
here.
we can get people to be like, okay, yeah, you can live free and like as you want to live, it's your choice, as long as you do not violate other people's rights. That's it.
Yeah.
Easy. So
it's a good reminder for people to be thinking about what they say and not just emotionally discharging.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that some people get on their platform and they just kind of allow their emotions to dominate, maybe, and just like whatever I'm going to say is whatever I'm going to say. And I would say that that might be someone who's not, who's maybe doing that for a reason that may not really be about teaching and influencing and helping others, And so if that's kind of the way someone wants to do their work, they certainly have their right. But my frustration is kind of similar in that I think we are too splintered and not unified or cohesive enough in the basic message, and then really focusing on what's really important to help the world. Like, what is it that people need to hear or understand about freedom and truth and natural law, or whatever, morality, whatever this basic thing is that Sarah's referring to about, live your life, do what you want, but have care and don't hurt other people. Don't steal from others, and don't participate with, all these things in the world that are stealing from us and hurting other people. We're trying to just to bring people's awareness to say, like, we're all going to stay away. We're going to do a boycott of all this evil shit. And, but, you could do it and have your personal life however you want. We're all working on something. Right. We all have a weakness. We all have some area we're more developed than another area. And that's why we're here. We're human. And so I don't think it's helpful to be pointing fingers and like so much being categorizing people or deciding that you're just going to, kind of ad hominem attack or attack groups of people without really being respectful to the individual journey and the nuances of their experiences, because it does turn people away and it will make people stop listening, and they're not going to get the message that we really, want them to hear, because in a way, it's confusing, the whole message. So yeah, I'm with you. I think that, and I, as a mental health therapist, right, I understand that there is a opposition in a way to being too compassionate, too empathetic, because it's that codependency that's missing the masculine boundary, right? And that we need both. We need that clarity, that bottom line, that truth about that there is right and wrong, that there is, corrective action required. And yet we can do that with that maternal compassion and understanding that people have stories, and we all make mistakes. We all learn by our experiences. We have to be careful how we judge others based, on their journey. And even when, it's still appropriate at times to point out or call out the wrongdoing, but I think we need to be clear, what is the wrongdoing? It's not just that you have a different opinion and you don't like what they're wearing, or,
when it comes from perspective or opinion, it's like, perspective and opinion, that doesn't matter. What matters is whether it's right or wrong. There you go. Whether it's true or whether it's fantasy. And that's exactly right, Leslie. I do think that, even though I think to get there, it's important for all of us to lead by example and say, okay, this is how morality works. This is how ethics works. This is how using your care works. This is how, practicing nonviolence works, not violating other people's rights. This is how self-defensive force works, not taking no shit from nobody. If somebody violates your rights, that's like that's one section of the freedom movement where it's all love and light, and they're like, oh, it's fine, and they're all pacifists, and they just would allow other people to violate their rights simply because they want to feel like it's wrong to defend themselves. And I've had people say this to me, oh, no, I can't do that. You don't copy what other people do, just because somebody does something to you. Be like, no, if that person punched you in the face, punch them in the face. Like, they're violating your physical rights.
I've seen people allowing of, like, terrible behavior because they're just all about freedom. And it's like, dude, it's not like a minor attracted person is not a real thing. That's called a pedophile, and that's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, well, they're not harming if it's consensual. No, like that is not a relevant lesson for children. Oh, I've literally heard people defend how free it is, and pedophiles, you can always spot them. It's the people who are trying to make it okay. So just know if you ever see that, they're trying to be so free.
Yeah.
It's consensual with the kid. No, they're just a pedo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the human brain doesn't even fully develop till the mid-20s,
Right.
So
yeah.
like, well, but there's a very clear differentiation in ability to understand what's going on, when you're
giving proper actual
a child
consent,
yeah, real consent.
That takes an adult mentality. And there's a reason. It's not just because, it's a man's law that says it's 18 makes you the adult and like all these other things. I've heard all these arguments. It's 18 because of that. It's just man's law that put it. I'm like, no, it's actually, we just by a happy coincidence, it's just 18 as like the man's law, because throughout all of history, it's been considered like 18 is where it is a noticeable change from young adult, like older teenager, stepping into a new kind of mental ability, like mental level, like leveling up from 18 to 19. Like this whole process going from 17 to about 21, a child's mind is still developing. Mm-hmm. So this is where and I remember this. I remember it distinctly. Going from 17 to 21, two completely different human beings right here. I went from child to adult in just a couple of years, and it happens that fast. So there's a reason why, just I think subconsciously, we all kind of consented to 18 being like, kind of a standard law where, that's where you can get an adult ID. You can get, those kinds of things. You can get a passport as an adult. You can get all kinds of things kind of start in adulthood through the whole system of everything throughout the world at 18. So I agree that like under 18, I mean, like I'm not going to pick bones about somebody who's say, 19 and 17 in a relationship. That's pretty close. You can't really pick bones about stuff like that. It's when they're like 35 and 16.
Yeah.
Or, 35 and 11. These are the issues that I would definitely have with that
even
kind of
24
thing.
and 16, like.
Yeah, that might be on the cusp of a little bit,
rapey.
My 23-year-old son was his impression was like 17. He was talking about like a 17 and a 25-year-old male. And he saw that as not appropriate, like that there's a big difference there. And, I agree.
There's just a world of different experience for the 20.
Yeah, it's like a whole nother, it's a whole different view. Like how, I remember if you think back and you read like a book when you were under the age of 18, and then you read the same book, or maybe it's a movie and then you watch the same movie over that age, and it's like looking at a different thing. It's like, oh, I did not see any of that the first time I went through this. But when you're 17,
right, you're 17 or 18, you're not going to see it like that for yourself. You're going to fight for your right to be with who you want, right? And it's like this thing about we don't know our blind spots. We don't know what we don't know. And when you lack, that's the whole kind of thing about maturity and enlightenment, is it's sort of opening up it's lifting veils and opening up new awarenesses that you didn't even know existed. It's like learning to be an expert in a craft of some sort. You might get your basics and think you're pretty cool and you're good, but you have no idea all the things that you don't know about its intricacies,
Yeah.
And so that's where I think we have to be compassionate, I guess, to just our human experience. And how that process of learning happens, and to have a foundation, right, of elders, of rites of passage, of honest conversations about sexuality and psychology, and to have protective adults who aren't overly harsh or shaming or punishing, right? So that these young people can sort of have a framework, and but also some leeway to learn and grow and be accepted back in, and to be able to have conversations and grow. We're missing that in this society. There's still a kind of a prudishness. Like Mark Passy was talking about it, and I thought it was a good point. He was saying that this our world right now is over sexualized, but really but immature about sex and real sexuality.
There's so much
And I agree.
shame. There's
Yes.
lots of shame. Like kids aren't allowed to be curious anymore. I see some parents with their kids and I'm just like, get off your fucking phone. Okay, here's my judgment coming out. Um, but it's like we were talking about them being disconnected, and like they didn't have that life where they were just biking down the street, no cell phones. Like they didn't have that. So I kind of was thinking, I'm like, is it because the parents are so disconnected and on the phone, or is it because the kid, like I'm sure for some families, but I think is it also they're with their grandparents and parents listening to old stories, but like they're just so cut off from it. Like I don't know.
There's no appreciation for that kind of thing anymore. I mean, and like really the next generation, I would suggest raise all your kids like latchkey kids, because you're going to get a far better outcome, I think. Just throw them out. Be like, all right, well, I'll see you when the lights come on. Get out of here.
That was my childhood.
That was my upbringing. I'm like, well, don't die out there. I'll see you at dinner.
I had no idea where I was.
There's water in the hose.
Yeah. I work with some elder women, not super elder, but grandmothers. Okay, let's say some grandmothers. And one of their observations, and they're kind of they come a little bit with old school experiences and some expectations of this family cohesiveness being maintained. And so when they go to their child's house and they want to have this experience with their grandkids, they're so frustrated because the grandkids have no real interest in hanging out with grandma. They're on their iPads, they're on their phones, they have to go to soccer, they're in their rooms, there seems to be this massive disconnect. And then the parents, their generation seems to have lost some of that value as well, and are so busy running around, and then also on their phones, just like you're saying, that they're not, it's not conscious about the implication of not promoting this relationship. And I'm hearing it multiple times from different people. And I think it's actually a real concern for the future, that another level of family connectedness and the values of like the previous generations around family and a non-technology based like connection is being gone.
And I see it everywhere as well. Every time I turn around, there's another 5-year-old with $1,000 laptop or a tablet. And I'm just like blown away by it. But I mean, go on, guys.
Well, I definitely think we're going to have to find a way to make a happy medium, because I used to be like, no tablets, like none of that when my daughter was very young. And then I realized like they're going to be raised around technology and everyone's going to have it. And if they don't have these skills, they are going to be behind. But I 100% see what you guys are saying too, where it's like, wow, kids are always in screens. They don't have those real life experiences anymore. And they're not really learning how to interact even with the world. Maybe I've mentioned it on past show, but I was definitely talking to somebody about it within the last few months. I went to my daughter's volleyball games, and she just started up a new season. So if my daughter ever watches this, I love you. You're a wonderful daughter. But their team sucked, like straight up sucked. and I was raised in sports, limited technology because, well, it was still developing. This ball is coming, and these girls aren't even like on the way to it. They just watch it drop and hit the ground. It's like, do you not have a reaction time in you, girl? Like, I just noticed a very, like, even the kids who sucked growing up at sports, they would be going, sooner.
Yeah.
And I just think that with the screen and stuff, they're not getting that real time interaction on how to estimate timing and coordination and distance and all these real life lessons. So I think that a challenge to come in our future is to make time without technology and make time for real life experience. Or Brian's not a huge game person, but we do family game nights and stuff like that. And he just does it because we like to get competitive and he likes to see us happy, but it's not his thing. But it's a great way to like bring everybody together. Like, no technology, you're facing one another, you have to use your brain and freaking think, you have to come up with some kind of strategy, you have to interact sometimes depending on the game. And I think we're just going to have to get clever and bring some of those past fun times to the present, because we are some of the last generations who remember a time before tablets existed and smartphones existed and technology absolutely exploded. It is a blessing in ways, but it can also have the polar opposite of a curse. And I think we're going to have to be proactive in kind of maintaining some sort of balance.
Yeah,
this is good to hear.
I agree.
Tyler and I, we talk about having kids too, and like we don't want to do screens at all. And like I feel like we will have to find a happy balance because it is part of the future. But we want to do bunkies, and we want to have like little lock boxes in the bunkies where we tell people like you can put your phone away for the week. And like we're not telling them they have to, but like try to bring that in. And like I don't think I kind of wonder because I think if you're not used to something, you're not grown up in something, you're not going to think that there's like another potential. Like if you're a kid who's been on your phone your whole time, you're not going to think to play a board game with your family. And like you said, like we're the elders for the future generation, which is kind of crazy and a little bit intimidating because like, yeah, like what is the
battle like that?
Yeah.
Sorry?
It's so addictive.
It's just weird to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. You
The
guys are right.
technology is super addictive, and it's not nearly, and the stimulation of that is so advanced compared to the kind of boringness of these, like you got little cardboard pieces on a, like you have to move it by hand, it's like a whole extreme difference.
What do you mean it's manual? What does manual mean?
Yeah.
Like, God forbid. I mean, ask a kid who's under the age of 18 if they know what an analog clock is.
Or old phones that attach to the wall, right?
Yeah,
my parents had some, so my kids aren't ignorant to those, but all their classmates are.
A lot of kids, they're just like, I don't know what that is. But like, what I did when, and you know what, my daughter actually thanked me years later. She's like, thank you so much for not just like, bending to giving me like a cell phone so I could do all the internet stuff like right away when I wanted to do it at like 14 or 15. And when she was older, she actually thanked me for it. She's like, because I see she can see how that affected her peers. And like, she's the biggest reader in her class now. Like the book, like whatever book it is, it's not thick enough for her. She's got it better go on for all of eternity. Like that's what kind of reader she is. With the stories that she likes, but what I ended up eventually doing, I'm like, okay, because she's going to have to, and trying to find that happy medium, because I was like that too. Like, no way. There ain't no 15-year-old on the planet who needs a tablet. Like, what are they going to do with it? Like, it's like giving a child an email. What are you going to do with an email? Like,
I feel like it's giving
you have thousands of people disagreeing with you, Sarah. You're so old-fashioned.
I know. I'm just like, what are you going to do with an email? Like, get out of here. Like,
my dad got my daughter an email when she was like 11.
Yeah, so
she signs up for apps and stuff.
And I can be quite old-fashioned. I've been told that. They're like, Sarah, you're a bit on the Puritan side. I'm like, I don't as far as I'm concerned, when people go in the bathroom, even you close the door, you stand there in the dark, and you wait there for 5 minutes, and you leave. And that's the only thing
Just
that's
stay
ever going to be
focused on your
happening.
task.
Yes, don't share anything with me. Don't call me from the bathroom. I had to tell my brother-in-law and my daughter, who are just trying to rise me. They're like, I was texting you while I was in the bathroom. I'm like, I'm gonna block you. I will block you. Like, don't do
Forgive you
that to
next
me.
week.
So they just like tease me. So they're like, you are old fashioned. I am very old fashioned sometimes.
We're
So
gonna need that.
what I did, because I realized I needed to pull back, and technology is part of this world, and I had that perspective kind of leveled into me. So when I think Emma was about 15, I got her a burner phone. So I just bought her like one of those like old little Nokia type of phones, where it's like the little antenna, and it's like the
Takes you
old.
a million times to send a text.
Yeah, and it's like, they wouldn't call it, they don't know what that word is now, the younger generation, but I know it as a burner phone because that's what drug dealers use. So that's like the only thing I know how to call it, like one of those little black Nokia type of phones. So I got her one of those because I wanted her. And I didn't really put any safeguards on it or all that like stuff that the phone companies say, oh, get your kid this phone and it's locked in this way or that way or whatever. I just gave her the number and like got her to learn how to use a phone, responsibly, like learning how, like just, trying to do it the way I was taught. Like you gradually learn money management, how to balance a checkbook, how to do certain basic things, and you get used to it. So yeah, so that was my idea. So like I got her this phone, and she had that for a couple of years. And then she finally became like totally used to the idea of like, I have a phone now if I'm out by myself, because we would let her go to the store by herself, and we were in the city, so I was a little bit nervous of her being out after dark
Right.
in the city, that the particular city we were at, because she was still kind of young. But she could go off on her own. She had her phone. She knew she could call us, and just getting used to being on her own, living that independence of a 15-year-old and whatnot. And so that's what I started her with. I got her one of those. So it's something to maybe, when other people who are trying to figure out this debacle, you don't want them on a smartphone, because it's the spiraling trap into like instantly, like they're all addicted to like Snapchat or whatever. Like, because that was like where my head was. Like I wasn't about to have like my kid on Snapchat or something like that, because it's too weird.
It
It's
shows
too
your
weird, and
location.
it shows your location, and there were just like a lot of weird things. Like even any social media, it feels too open for kids, and some kids develop at different levels at different ages.
Yeah.
Sometimes kids mature a little faster, sometimes kids don't mature very quickly at all,
I
and you
was
gotta
actually,
consider that.
I was so loose about it, in hindsight, I would have regulated the access so much more, and it's actually, you got to do it before they hit a certain age, because they know more about it than we do. They know how to get, like I had the some kind of location tracker for my daughter, and she just learned how to bypass it. I didn't know how to undo what she did. Like, she just made it completely like pointless to spend that money every month, And so it's like I was behind on the knowledge about the technology and about even what they were exposed to. So then my older kids were like telling me like, Mom, this is how Snapchat works, and it was like kind of too late in a way, in some ways, without a big ordeal. So I would say, be very aware of what's, as a parent, be aware of what's out there. Don't take it
I
for granted.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
My oldest is going to be turning 13 and she just entered middle school and it's starting to become an issue to get a hold of her now. And so we're seriously considering getting her a phone this year. And I kind of want to be a controlling Capricorn about it. I just do. Like,
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
that there are creeps out there, no social medias. I love the flip phone idea, but I heard they're getting discontinued. Sorry, my 110-pound big dog is.
Well,
I had to take them out earlier.
If it helps, Brittany, I use T-Mobile, and there's like 3 different options for a T-Mobile has flip phones that they have as a standard.
Okay.
Because people still want flip phones. So I don't know if T-Mobile is good there.
I like that idea. She would hate that, but it would get the job done, and she could learn how long it takes to make a text on T9.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah.
You can gradually increase, that access and the privilege and the trust, right? She can earn
I've been researching phones where there's some, like with Gab, where it's maybe $200 for the phone, but it's like super kind of locked and it's basic, but they could still text the friends, but no social medias. And like, yeah, I'm definitely, but then we might be able to add her on Brian's plan for cheap. But so I'm searching apps too. But yeah, I am keeping my options open.
No. And I think the time allocation is probably the hardest thing and the most destructive, actually. Even, like
how much time they're on it.
They're on it, yes. Because I'm more okay with like maybe my kids being exposed to things, but if I understand what they're being exposed to, but it's the stuff that we don't know that they can access that's really scary.
I think it's something for everybody to kind of consider, that
do their own way.
Like technology is not bad. Technology is beneficial to us. It does a lot of really great things, but it's about not letting it take control over everything, every part of our lives.
And every creepo can use it too.
That's it. Right. If your 8-year-old's on
everyone.
That's it. If your 8-year-old knows how to use social media, so does the 45-year-old pervert who's like pretending to be 8. So it's like, you gotta not be paranoid, but just be paying attention. Yeah, paying attention. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I think too, like teaching your kids, it's part of this teaching of self-defense, right? Because if you just restrict a child from access and then they have no idea what they're not missing, as soon as they're of age, they're gonna be
hardcore,
and they're gonna be vulnerable, and they're gonna feel dumb, and they're gonna feel really out of place, and so there's a lot of that. But it's almost like, okay, this is the stuff that's out there, and how do you identify the risks of that? How do you protect yourself from that? It's kind of like letting my kid walk home from the school bus stop. And, my thinking, well, why should I not allow her to walk home from the school bus stop? She needs to know how to be confident and walk through, down a busy road. It's a skill. And how do I help her to be a kid that's not a target, right? How do I alert her to the suspicious behaviors and activities and know to keep her eye out, but not be so afraid that she's afraid to go anywhere, right? It's like, how do you balance these things out?
Yeah, exactly. And that, I think, go on, Katrina, if you had.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm like, I wonder if there's any presenters out there who kind of bridge a gap with like talking about the phone addictions or these phones and like the crimes, like the human trafficking, like to lightly teach that to kids outside of the school system or inside of the school system. I don't know if that's still happening, because I feel like that was one of the benefits looking back from the school system, is when the cops or firemen would come in and they would talk about, bullying. They would talk about drugs, but like they didn't really talk about it, human trafficking, which is curious. And
I don't think they would, because that's a no subject.
Well, I don't know, because like I remember going to a library back, this was like maybe 8 years ago, and there was a cop there. I went to this presentation where he was talking about the human trafficking. Like he was I think he was a cop and investigating into it. He like had a great presentation, and I was just like, it wasn't like overwhelming, but it was eye-opening. And I think kids need to learn about this. This is what I talked to Tyler about. I'm like, how are we going to introduce all these crazy things in the world? And like, yeah, like
As
it's
they're
I
relevant, they'll come up
yeah, I would
naturally, I promise.
yeah, I would say that it's best to make that discernment on when to approach topics as the kid is developing, because like, I was saying, some kids develop not as fast as others, some kids develop really quickly, and it
yeah,
becomes relevant, like, and I kind of went by the rule, like, if they're within enough, mental wherewithal enough to ask a certain question, then they're at the level that they can handle the
yeah,
information, or at least some of the information,
You can give it
because
age
they've,
appropriately too.
yeah. I mean, it's like when my daughter had to go into, really, it would be like middle school. And in Ireland, what they do is they don't have elementary, middle school, and high school. What they have is they have primary and secondary school. So when kids are going into secondary school, you have kids as young as 14. And if they're advanced, 13, in the same building as kids who are 18. And
yeah,
my old fashioned way was like, no, we're not doing that, because there's that age, there's that mind gap there. So we had to kind of approach this in a way where, like, how are we gonna handle this? Because in Ireland, if it seems, they're like, that's normal, that's how it's done. I'm like, that's disgusting. Like, they're two different age groups. There's a reason why you separate them, because a 14-year-old is not going to be on the same level as an 18-year-old mentally. So we had to approach the subject of things like, when 17, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, they get into more mischief. Maybe there's more, promiscuity involved. There's more drugs involved, alcohol in Ireland, especially, that kind of thing. So we kind of had to sit her down and go over this kind of information in a way that she could take it in. So sometimes it's about age, and it comes up to that. And sometimes it's about situation. And I promise you, like Brittany said, you'll know when it's time to, like, okay, we gotta like, clear this a little bit, straighten it out a little bit, so that the kid is not confused about whatever situation they're going into.
yeah.
So yeah, definitely. So we did have one more section you brought us, Katrina, that we could go through. And it leads into, like, what we've been talking about, leading by example. And where's the vulnerability in this? And, how we're showing that vulnerability to the people who are vulnerable, and leading them into, better directions. And there's a lot of advertising markets to people with insecure attachments, because it's those people who will look into marketing when they don't have the answers coming from their parents or any reliable sources. So that was the next section of the topic. So I'll let you go, Katrina, on your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, when Brittany was bringing up Christianity and the values, I didn't grow up Christianity or Christian. Um, but what she's saying resonates because like I said, like I think a lot of the advertisements they go towards the people who are vulnerable. And like there's always a victim and perpetrator in that. Or like not necessarily like overtly, but covertly. Like if somebody's trying to appease somebody on a date, they're ready to be in a relationship where like they don't really have a voice, the power's given to the other person. um and that's my problem with religion, which you guys were talking about, is like I think this is where there's another gap in society. It's like there's lots of people who are, you know, into Christianity, like looking outside of themselves too. And then it's like, oh, I have a point I was gonna make. Like it's often this like outside outsourcing, like looking outside of ourselves. And with like the social media, like it's all looking outside of ourselves and not teaching. I think my biggest caveat would be if I were to ever give people advice for raising daughters, it's your daughter's going to be strong. Like, teach her to be strong. Don't teach her to be afraid of men. Teach her to be an equal, not better than men. Because as soon as you teach her to be afraid, she's going to have to fight against them too, in one way, shape, or form. And then enters feminism. And
Yeah. I mean, at least the toxic version of feminism, the new modern
yeah,
version of it, that's just destroying how women think and feel about men. It's a fear-based response. And now, you got women who they're compensating by acting like they're better or superior to men instead of understanding that it's a equal team effort. It's
yeah,
it's a community that you're building with your partner
yeah,
and your children. That's your inner community. And yeah, going outside of yourself to look for answers instead of within.
yeah. Yeah, and like with religion, I find lots of like the sexual shame was covered up, and like that's where like people who are promiscuous, they're overtly acting out that sexual shame. Like I find we're very polarized as a society where we're trying to go one way, but like we go the complete opposite. Like
Yeah.
it's another gap that like another controlling of groups of people in the religious system where it's like even like talking about my spiritual beliefs, there's some people who kind of come on to me saying I'm still caught in the new age. And I look at my posts and I'm like, no, like I'm talking about shadow work. And like it's like I find there's like a slew of people who've gone to Christianity, but it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel like it's coming from this um like reverence for spirit, for God. And like if you believe in God in a certain way, you're like deemed a new age, or you're deemed like you're not doing it right. Like it's just another barrier to separate us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just wanted to point out too, like about what you're saying is that there's all this shame about women being promiscuous and free with their love and all that. And I just want to point out too that it's like where a lot of that does, I think, come from like past trauma and deep-seated trauma. Like at the same time, like the only like if women don't want to be attached to in a relationship and they're young, I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with like women dating and, men dating, and like they're young, they're not attached to people. And even in relationships you get where they're consenting adults and you got a couple who are like, okay, we have an open relationship. I don't even have like a real problem with that because they both agree to it. Nobody's cheating on each other. It's one thing
Yeah,
if the other one doesn't know that you're
right.
in an open relationship. So like I think there's a lot of shaming in that too, where it's like, yeah, I don't think that's the best choice people could make. But as long as they're not violating people's rights, again, is like then you've got to make that balance within that, that perspective of it. Like I think there's a better path for people. But I mean, that doesn't mean that you can't be like young and dating either. So
Yeah.
I just didn't want people to think that that's what we were talking about. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think like, like it's like the friends or benefits thing. I'm like, I don't personally agree with it. I don't think it's of most people's benefits, but I also don't judge it and I don't think it's wrong. I think it's different if you're like, you don't want anything to do with the person the next day and it's just like there's no respect. It's, you can't even have lunch with the person the next day. That's kind of, I don't think that that's helpful for people. And I don't think it shows appreciation for one another. And I also understand, like, sometimes you're not ready to settle down at 18, you know?
So, just I want to know what Leslie and Brittany think about that stuff too.
Yeah, I think what's important, what I would hope to share with young people is that they just start to question what they're doing, question what they're told, question what their peers are doing, question where it's coming from. What's the origin of these messages? Is there even a direct message, or is, the message just coming sideways from random places? Who are you? Everyone, who's, starting to come into their teenage years or after puberty and sort of like experiencing all of this sort of transformation, it's like an important time of self-discovery. And I think that somehow, I think as like you're saying, this trippy idea that we're like the elders of, in a way, we're the ones holding certain knowledge and wisdom and experience, which is really crazy. But how can we, impart, this wisdom or this knowledge to younger generations? How can we lead by example? What is the modern way of doing that? I think those are important questions for all of us.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I said earlier too was like the victim perpetrator, and I think I said like male is the perpetrator, woman is the victim. One thing that like I think is important too is teaching girls that they could be just as abusive and toxic. I remember working at a women's shelter, and we did these presentations once a year for like young girls aged, they were, I think, grade like they were dating, like not dating, but they were learning about what relationships were like. So like between 13 to 16 years old. And I remember the messaging from the shelter was like, we would talk about like gay and lesbian relationships, and we'd talk about heterosexual relationships. But the wording was like basically the intention that men were the ones who were abusive. And like there was never any mention that girls could be abusive or that there was like harm to men from women. And that's not that, like, I think that has to be talked about in relationships these days and relating to one another as teenagers and young kids. Like, it's not just men who are perpetrators.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. And there's different, I think we spoke about this before in an earlier show, there's different types of, abusers. And it's like not, and some of you may not even call them abusers. They're more like victims who use their victimization as a way to control the other one. And that's just as abusive in its own way. It's like all psychological, manipulative, emotional abuse. Yeah, which is just as, wrong to do, I think. Yeah, definitely. Brittany, did you have some more thoughts?
Well, yeah, I liked what Leslie was saying on imparting things to people. So if there's any young ones out there, I encourage you to conserve yourself. Like, don't just give yourself freely to everybody. It's okay to love people, but you don't have to go all the way. Little encouragement, when I was 18 years old, I went to a clinic with my best friend to find out that she had herpes, one that you cannot get rid of. And I like that Leslie was encouraging them to question themselves. Definitely question yourself, everything. And think of the long term. I think a lot of the choices that people make, especially in hookup culture, are very short term choices, very temporary choices. I think people should look at what is most important to them, what they value, how they handle situations, and find a partner who is actually compatible with you, not just full of sexy chemistry, but like compatible, like you fit together really well. And look at the long haul, because something I think a lot of women forget about, and men, they have their seeds as long as they can get it up. They can be real old and still make babies and stuff. But us ladies, we age. We do have something of a biological clock. And, you want to think about when you're older. Like most women inherently want to nurture and care. And a lot of women make it to 50 and they've fucked everybody and their daddies and they have no kids and they have nothing left to nurture. And women kind of go a little nuts when they don't have anything to nurture and when they don't have anything left behind. So think about the long haul. Think about your future, not just the short term moment. And I guess that's my only thoughts.
No, that's a good point. And, for kids, like, not to be in a rush, like you don't have to go planning out your whole life.
Yeah.
Just keep it loose and easy. Plans don't always pan out the way you think it's going to work. You're going to have this whole thing planned out and then it's just going to go a totally different direction. But there's also no reason to be in a rush. And just because everybody else is doing things or this or that or whatever, or it's popular or whatever the case may be, you have to really, as an individual, especially a young individual, you have to really take it in and be patient and be like, is that really something you're comfortable with or not? And oftentimes I talk to kids who like they might be pressured into things because all the other kids are doing it, but they're not ready. They're not comfortable with it. They're not even comfortable with thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So to pressure children, especially these adults out there who are pressuring children to live in this fast-paced world of like basically what's like, sex and rock and roll, like really at earlier and earlier and earlier ages. You got some of these parents going, like I just saw one video of this woman and she's posting up on TikTok or whatever about her. This baby isn't more than, I don't know, 10 months, 12 months old. And she's holding him up and she's like, I just told his grandfather that my son says he's gay. I'm like, he heard the word somewhere. Like the kid is obviously an early talking age. Like some kids learn to talk a bit early. And he probably heard it somewhere and he's just repeating because that's what babies do.
They don't even know what that means.
Yeah. So it's stuff like this. And, shame on those adults who are putting their children in the fast lane when really they should just allow their children to be children. And, if they're gay, then they're gay. But like, you don't be like, oh, you're gay. Let's make an announcement and like a birthday party for it. And let's like, start looking at hormone therapy and like throw them into the
special.
Yeah. Where every child is special.
Maybe was it Munchausen syndrome, the one where the parent basically gets off on all the attention they get from causing problems with their child? It sounds similar to that. Someone who's just waiting to get that attention and just.
That's a good point to bring up, Brittany. Yeah, that's a very good point to bring out. And I hadn't even thought of it, but yeah, they should like write that in as like, a mental disease right next to Munchausen syndrome, where parents are abusing their kids and making, keeping their children sick and, grifting the government and grifting the community, and they're getting all this attention because they have a sick kid.
Or a gay one, or a trans one. It's like a different version of that illness.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. Great to consider.
I remember I was at a cafe one day and this woman had her baby. She was like a barista at the cafe and she had her baby in the car seat, just like, or not the car seat, the carrier, just hanging out with her at work. But it was kind of weird. It was like the baby was so close to the door. And I was like, aren't you just kind of scared your baby can be snatched away? Like, it was just bizarre. Like, there was access to the public seeing her baby. And I was just like, that's fucking strange. And then she was like holding him and like talking to him. And she's like, he's just so kind and so like, but it felt like it was like she was saying, like, he doesn't put me through like difficulty. Like it was coming from this place of like, he's a good baby. Like
Wait till the
he's,
second one. I'm kidding.
yeah. But it was coming from a place of like, I don't even know how to describe it, but like he's so kind. He's a good baby. Like as if like it was not her responsibility. Like there was something in that baby already responsible for like his mom's like
That's,
emotional emotions.
yeah, that certainly sounds maybe like mom's got one or two
Yeah.
issues herself, like maybe she didn't get that kind of affection when she was that
Yeah.
age, and maybe it just transmits like that.
Yeah, I felt sick to my stomach when that I saw that. But I think another thing I would impart to the kids too is like taking your time, like you guys said, like it doesn't have to be a race, and like making sure you actually like the person, and it's not about them liking you. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter if they like you. I mean, it does in the long run, but like you have to like them first. Like if I were to ever tell, even young 20-year-olds, if you're going on a date, don't care if they like you or not. Do you like them? I wish somebody told me that when I was younger.
Yeah. Oh, me too. That's pretty good advice. And like I would kind of add to that. It's like there's a saying in my husband's family, and I kind of picked it up because my husband would say it. And he's like, sometimes in this world, you just kind of got to go with the flow and be like, you know what? Some will, some won't. So what? And you leave it at that. And like, not everybody's going to want to be your best friend or, and to change yourself to be like what other people might want you to be like, that's not being authentic and it's not being healthy, like in your mind and your heart. And like, I do feel like there's a lot of pressure for children to be like other people and
Yeah.
like be like the other kids in their peer, like if that's the majority. And there's a lot of pressure for that. And, you know, I think that's a good point to bring up. You just gotta be more independent than that.
Yeah, you got to be an
Actually,
individual.
yeah. You said be more independent. I was gonna say for anyone struggling with stuff like that, look into codependency because it will and learn how to become healthy. Because a lot of the times a lot of people I think have codependency imprinted in them because we were kids. We were codependent upon parents, but at some point, that's not always healthy. So if you find yourself enmeshing with other people or being like a chameleon and turning into something that somebody else wants just to make them happy and
Yeah,
sacrificing yourself for another, but to the point of destruction, definitely look into codependency and how to heal from that.
Someone
absolutely.
who,
Like the first person you should learn how to love is yourself.
Yeah.
yeah,
And changing yourself for others, it ain't worth it. It's just not worth it. I mean, because I guarantee you, the people that like when kids are young, when when they change for the wrong reasons, the people who appreciate who they're changing for, they ain't gonna appreciate that. They never do. They never do.
no, they're
Guaranteed.
them more and
Just
use them.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think we gotta be able to allow our kids to launch and learn some of these things for themselves because yeah, kids don't want to listen to us or every single thing we say. That's unlikely. They want to have these experiences and learn these lessons on their own, which I think is important for kids to do. We're just stewards. We're here to guide them, be like, here's a a whole here's a whole binder for like things for you to consider. Don't die out there. Good luck. Call me at Christmas. You know, I'm just saying, like, because I have that's stuff I have to work with, allowing my kids to, detaching You know, she's 18. No, sorry, I keep saying that. She's 19. She's 19 years old. She's an adult, and we did what we could with her. We got to let that go. So some parents I do know struggle with that detachment process, which I do myself. But I think it's important for these younger kids to understand that there's nothing wrong with experimenting, going out in the world, learning your lessons yourself, figuring it out. Just, think before you do. Think before you do. Think and feel before you do. Yeah. Instead of doing first, because, with youth, I'm sure you guys remember youth, we're impulsive. We're just going for it, without any thought or any care whatsoever. And that's how we hit hard, crash right into the ground for it. So, I mean, I did. I was just like straight for it, nihilism.
Good way to learn.
I'm like, it's fine. This will be fine. And then I learned, you'd figure that out real quick, like that really hurt a lot. So, I do think that it's important, for kids to really, first person you should really be trying to love and impress is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That needs to come first.
Yeah. I think speaking about codependency, like Brittany was saying, there's a girl or a psychiatrist, psychotherapist. She's a psychotherapist. And I couldn't recommend this girl enough. She got me through so much growing up, in my early 20s. She talks about codependency in a way that like you can't help but understand what she's talking about. Like yesterday I was listening to her and she was having a conversation with her husband, and he's like, I never dated somebody wanting something out of them. I dated them because I was like, I wanted to develop a relationship. And she just like, she felt it, and she's just like, most people are like that. But when you grow up in a narcissistic family system, you learn that you're a commodity. And like when you leave that system and you try and date outside of that system, and you're in a safe relationship, which is what I wanted to talk about too, is you don't know how to be in a safe relationship because you're used to like, what does this person want to do with me? Like I'm their play toy, basically. Not literally, but like
sometimes quite physically.
Well, yeah. But I mean, it could be metaphorically too. And it's like,
yeah, I totally hear you. Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
When you're not used to that upbringing, you kind of like, you don't know how to be in it. I'm speaking from experience. I did not know how to be. Like, I'm sure there was people back in the day that I probably like would have got along great with, but because I wasn't safe, I didn't feel safe in my body. So I needed that familiar structure. Like I needed to be in that until I unlearned that that's not healthy. You're not supposed to be somebody's commodity. You're not supposed to be on display for somebody to appease them.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Very
her name's,
relatable.
yeah. I couldn't recommend her enough though. And especially to young women, boys too, but like, girls who are dating, and like, I'd say if you're even starting a relationship, Stacy Hoch, Hoch is her last name. She's very relatable.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. Yeah. I mean, it can be difficult to try to build a good, healthy relationship when you're like, I don't even have the foundation. When you don't even have the psychological foundation in order to know what that even looks like. Like you can't really develop one. And we have it might be I'm sure it is the reason why we have such a high rate of dysfunctional relationships or split up relationships and split up families. And, it's not always the case with that, but because a lot of people can't function healthy in a relationship, and maybe it's due to past traumas. Maybe it's just due to what you experienced as a young kid, like maybe with how your own parents handled their relationships, then like how you grow up thinking, oh, that's normal then, right? So you develop those habits because you think that's normal.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think
So
kids need to know that relationships, like life, are really mundane. They're not this like fireworks. Like you're not gonna have this like
24/7.
no, it's not real. It's an addiction. People get addicted to that.
yeah,
I can put a tangent on this, but like they get addicted to that feeling, and when it's not there, like I speak for myself, especially in the beginning of my relationship with Tyler, it's like you almost like want to start a fight because you don't know what to do in the calm waters.
yeah, you're
And
like,
for,
okay, when's it gonna happen? Let's
yeah,
go, I'm ready. You're up in arms over it. You're just like, I know what you're about. And it's
yeah.
like all in your head. Like you're like you just made a bunch of
We've
crap up in your head. You just like, okay, I gotta pull that back a little bit. A little
You
bit.
mean
And
you don't want anything from me? You mean you're just here to love me? What's
yeah,
that?
like, what do you mean? There's no strings attached to this? You don't want anything back? Okay. Yeah, part of you wants to get suspicious, but I think that's more of the trauma from societal, like the conditioning from,
Yeah.
like the dark occultist kind of conditioning. I was just watching a TV show. Yeah, okay, Leslie, I saw you message, no problem. So we'll finish up here in about 15 minutes, guys. But
Okay.
I was just watching because I use this app called Tubi, and it's like a free app with like free TV because
I think
I'm not
Brian
gonna
uses that sometimes.
yeah, I'm not gonna pay for cable. It's
I don't
crazy.
either.
Just like I don't think I paid for cable and like because I just don't care about TV. Like I could
Mhm.
live without TV. So it's been like easily 15 years since I actually like cared about having cable in the house or whatever. But this app, it's like a free app or whatever, and it's like obviously like targeting like lower income people. Like that's all the commercials. It's all commercials that target the obvious lower income, which I'm like, huh, this is like programming right here.
Mm.
And it's like a lot of the commercials are all like super, super like way out on the edge, liberal, like
Oh
liberal,
man.
liberal, like the type of people who would do something like transition their 5-year-old to another gender, like that kind of extreme. So it's clearly that kind of advertisement, but I'm like, okay, well, that stuff doesn't work on me, so that's good. So, but I'll use it to like watch, I'll put something on while I'm working or whatever. But I put on this old show called 21 Jump Street. If anybody knows
I
this
feel like
show,
I saw that a while ago, but I don't remember.
I'm
it's an
sorry, I'm
old.
oblivious to this one.
I didn't even know about it. I just saw it on this, but it's like this old, like maybe 90s, early 90s show or something. Johnny Depp is in it, and he's like a
Oh,
baby.
maybe not.
He's probably like 20 in it. Young, very young Johnny Depp, and I think the start of his real career in this. But I'm watching some of this, and I had to change it back to the black and white Dark Shadows classic because I can handle that. It's like normal television to me. But there's so much programming within this TV show, and like the first season was fine, and then it gets into the second season, and it's like a little bit more, where they're putting in more kind of wokish type of indoctrinating kind of signals in there. And I could see it. I could recognize it now. I'm like, this is in the early 90s. I think it's the early 90s.
Mm.
They program by the
Um,
decades, they say.
yeah. And like then the
Yuri
third season
Bezmenov.
comes in, and every single episode is a hard line, obvious, like obvious. They talk about women. It's like women who are like the biggest rape victims on the planet, and trafficking women, and like nothing talking about like trafficking children or both boys and girls. It's all about rape on
the victim.
women specifically, and they've got one main character in it who's like super like all about, I mean, her whole character is very toxic feminism kind of personality. So
I'll be right back.
every single episode is so distinctly what you might just call woke. It's like a woke subject, like hard pressing. I'm like, wow. And there were like, this was a show for like 16-year-olds back in the early 90s. And I'm just seeing it now as an adult. And I'm like, okay, that now I can see what people were saying like back, that this is something that's been going on and developing our subconscious. It's in our societal, like, indoctrinating us into certain ways of thinking and how we go about life. And this is one of those things. And it was so obvious to me that this show 21 Jump Street is doing that.
Great.
Like, and
there was
it's
a remake.
obvious.
I was just looking up. There was a remake with, I think, Channing or
Really?
Channing
Okay.
Tatum, right? The real pop guy, in 2012 too. So they were, bringing those themes to this generation too, because he's a super popular actor.
Yeah. I mean, if anybody ever wanted to go through, just like skim through the third season, and you'd be like, oh my God, like this is so, and it was like everything is a different topic. Like one of them was about, go on, Katrina.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, like, it's like so purposely targeted, because the people who would have those channels, if it was on cable. Oh, you said it was on Tubi?
Yeah, it was on TV a long time ago, and now it's like on this app television thing. But yeah, it was very purposeful, very direct with all of the episodes. Like one was all about very conservative, rich white boys, young high school kids who were going after, homosexuals and beating the hell out of them. Like everything was like, making people think, you're watching this episode and a 16-year-old's like, oh, so it's rich, white, conservative, Republican men, and they go out and they bash gay people, and that's just what they do. And every single episode is like this. They pick a topic and they're like that. It's like, they're really bizarre to watch. I was like, I can't watch anymore.
It would be a cool idea. Like people do movie breakdowns, but to actually, and then on the Warriors chat recently, they did a thing about shitcoms. I think that if people like to watch these breakdowns of shows and movies and TV series, I think it would be cool actually to do some of those breakdowns like on a show like that.
Yeah.
Because it is eye-opening.
Maybe we can ask our viewers to compile, put in the chat, put in the comments, like shows you might think might be interesting to examine and see, especially older ones, older shows, TV shows, especially like ones that are targeted at children. So, yeah.
I wanted to just, as we're winding down, just sort of say something around, what would I want young women, young girls, teenagers, all people to learn. And it's to really learn to check in with yourself about what you really, think and feel, and start to recognize that what ambivalence feels like, what inner disconnection feels like, and that when you make a decision that is potentially, important and that could have real consequences, like, sexual activity is something that potentially has consequences, whether it's emotional or physical, temporary or lifelong, treatable or not, like there's some impact to a decision around sexual behavior. And so if you are going to say yes, like make sure that your whole self says yes, and that it's not like part of you says yes because you think you should say yes and because you're being pressured to say yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Whatever the reasons are, right? If a part of you says no, listen to that. And it's okay to slow things down. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say, I need time to think about this. It's okay. And sometimes there's like this illusion of pressure and somehow like some bad thing's going to happen. You're going to lose the guy. The guy's going to, be uncomfortable, whatever it might be. There's a lot of anxiety sometimes about saying no. And, I think that's important to look at that. Is it coming from fear? Is it coming from insecurity? That if you don't feel like it's a full yes, it's okay to say no. It's okay to take some charge, to set some boundaries for yourself. In fact, it's really important to practice that and to realize that you can still be okay, and that process of setting a boundary, of setting no, is going to set the stage for the quality of the relationships you have. Because what we experience in great part is based on the boundaries we set. And if we don't set boundaries, or we don't set boundaries that are true of what our true needs are, then we're going to keep having these situations where we're up against uncomfortable pressure. And our boundaries will be tested. So I think it's a really important lesson that a lot of women don't even get to until later in life. And it's very sad. So I wanted to just share that.
Well,
I love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. If you're going to lose him, you're going to lose you first. And like, if you were going to lose him, you'd lose him anyway. And it's never worth selling yourself for what somebody else thinks. I really do say this as somebody who has been in those shoes. And I like you said, feeling into what you're feeling. What is your heart telling you? If it's not a full yes, it's a no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important.
Absolutely.
That's solid.
You want to think about, like, if the person that you're interacting with, if they can't accept that no, because you're not a full yes, then it ain't right. So it's just not the right, then that should be the icing on the cake there. Like, this person can't accept this right now. So that's definitely not the moment for the young person who's moving into adulthood and learning about life.
I'd also tell them, like, find an influence, even if it's like from a book and maybe you can't see it in your surroundings. Find an influence who you feel inspired by, and like, bring their energy into you when you like have to set boundaries. Like, what would this person do? It sounds silly, and it really does help. It's like, what would you say to a friend? What would you say to your friend who is telling you the exact same story? Because I know for myself, I was very protective of other people, but not so much with myself.
I love that you said that. I relate to that a lot.
Yeah.
I had to do the same thing where it's like, man, if my friend had this situation and came to me, what would I tell her? And I need to take my own damn advice. It's a valid point to make. And I love that you made the point to find somebody who inspires you. I kind of use the word entrain when talking about a new belief, but having a person who emanates something that you want to be, that will help you to entrain with their thinking, with their mindset. And that can help you to become a better person just in your own way.
Yeah. Yeah, to give you confidence. Yeah. And I think too, like if you are worried about what people think at the least, and you're really stuck in that and you're struggling to change that, not that we want to like think like, what would this person think, but what would this influencer, or like, not influencer, but what would this person who's a good influence on me, what would they tell me? Not because of what they think, but because I respect them and I know they respect themselves. Like, what would their words of wisdom be?
Yeah. Those are really good points. It's like internalizing an image, internalizing an ideal or a role model, right? And we learn that way. it's kind of like the idea of the tracing board. We trace that model that's set out for us in order to start to integrate it into us, right? So having that ideal, that person, that influencer, that person who inspires you, I think it's a great idea. And then I think the other thing is watch out for when you start keeping secrets and stop sharing things with your friends, because I know that was a pitfall of mine. I would like continue to go forward with a relationship that a part of me knew was a mistake, and that if I talked to my girlfriends about it, they would point that out to me, and I didn't want to hear that, so I wouldn't tell them. And then later I'd be like, I'm so isolated and alone, and I just like spiraled into this unhealthy relationship. And where, why didn't anybody stop me? Well, because I didn't allow that. And so stay in connection with your girlfriends, with your peers, your friends. Like that's a way that women and our friends can be of support to each other and look out for each other and be honest, and loving and compassionate at the same time. Stay honest with yourself. Don't block it. Yeah,
absolutely. I think we're coming to our end, guys. We want to thank everybody for joining us today, and we want to thank Katrina for joining us today because she brought up a really good topic, something I think that should probably be discussed a lot more. So to learn, healthy thought processes and in regards to the subject, and not make it some kind of hobby or a race to the bottom, as I might say with some things. It doesn't have to be like that. There is supposed to be developmental stepping stone process with growing up and developing and learning this, that, or the other thing. So I want to thank Katrina Monaghan for joining us today, and I would like her to tell us what kind of work she's doing.
Oh, I'm so happy I came on this call. I hope like young girls watch this, and like boys too, but especially young girls, to know that it's okay to stand up for themselves. And I feel like we're giving this like piece to our younger self. So I'm very grateful. Right now, I'm doing quite a bit of different things. I'm kind of in this like big transition creative era. So right now I'm a pet sitter and a dog walker. I'm writing a book. I'm making a card game that Sarah's, sorry, phone's almost dying. I'm making a card game that Sarah's helping me with the artwork for. My partner and I, we're getting property. We're hoping to be there by this time next year, where we'll be doing like family retreats. I really want to encourage like young kids and elderly people to come and garden and have like kind of like the cycle of life together. It's like a huge dream. There's lots to it. Cool. Yeah. So lots of different things are percolating. Nothing's really complete yet, but that's part of it. And I'm writing a book.
Where do people find you and be able to follow the progress?
My Facebook page, I think, would be best for now until I build a website. So Katrina Monaghan. I'm sure you guys can tag me probably on Facebook, maybe.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for reaching out to us. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And
thanks for joining us. Love the topic.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was enjoyable for us to hear somebody who had been listening to the Girls Club, and then they're like, oh, I've got an idea for a topic, and to bring you on and to really talk about this was really, it was a great topic and a great conversation. And we will definitely be sure to put in Katrina's information in the description. So go and check her out. And like she said, you can find her on Facebook, where she, posts her stuff, and you can get to know her a little bit more. And I think that's probably it for episode number 10.
10, I believe. Yeah.
A decade. Yeah. We've grown a decade older.
Yeah. And we're almost at that year point. So two more episodes, and you'll have a year of the Girls Club.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
And
Thank you,
yeah.
Sarah, for
yeah,
leading this team and initiating this.
yeah,
Well,
thank
congratulations. That's exciting.
yeah, it's gonna be so crazy. So um yeah, we'll have a good episode on the 1 year mark, so don't miss it, guys. So yep, thank you everybody who listened for listening. Go check out Brittany Ashby and her work. As usual, her link will be there so you can go and find the stuff she does. Go check out Leslie Power's work as well, and then go check out Katrina and show her your support in this journey and building a better world out there for all
And
that is
Sarah's
out
new
there.
radio show.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And the new radio show, you can go and find the radio show on Revolution Radio. It's crosstalk every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Nice.
So, and
Exciting.
I mean, so if you're sensitive, you may not want to listen to me, but
And I'll be on with you in September, I believe.
that's right. Leslie's coming on September, and you guys don't want to miss that because it's gonna be burning. It's gonna
Yeah.
be we're gonna burn people.
Oh my goodness, getting ready. All right, guys, thank you so much. This has been
Thanks,
fun.
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks all the listeners.
Bye-bye.
Bye.